Shaw Cable, dedicated to the community, service and you, proudly presents Spotlight on UNBC, the University of Northern British Columbia.
Brought to you in part by Northland Chrysler Jeep and Northwood Pulp and Timber Limited.
Northland Chrysler Jeep, home of the #1 selling minivan in North America, is located at 3rd and Vancouver in Prince George. Northland has been in business since 1984. Northland Chrysler Jeep is a proud sponsor of Spotlight on UNBC, a program designed to let you know what's happening at your university. Northland Chrysler Jeep, your Eagle and Dodge truck dealer, is where people make the difference. Northwood Pulp and Timber is a proud sponsor of Shaw Cable 10 and its volunteer-produced television programs. Northwood also supports UNBC. As a partner in progress, Northwood has donated $350,000 towards the scholarship fund. When matched by the government, it represents a contribution of $700,000.
Winter has come to the Prince George campus, but it will no doubt be warmer on August 17th when Queen Elizabeth comes to officially open this campus. Hi, my name is Rob Van Addercombe, and welcome to this edition of Spotlight on UNBC. On this program, we're going to take an in-depth look at the Faculty of Natural Resources and Environmental Studies and meet the new regional coordinator for the Northwestern region. When people talk of the construction season, they typically think of the warm months in the spring and summer. But construction is continuing here on Cranbrook Hill despite the arrival of winter, and that's our feature story coming up next here on Spotlight on UNBC.
Spotlight on UNBC with your host, Rob Van Addercombe.
There's only a few months to go before the Queen arrives to open this campus, but if construction continues at its current rapid pace, there's no doubt students will have a home here in September.
All this snow isn't affecting us at all. A little bit of productivity maybe, because when you've got 2 or 3 feet of snow, now and again the guys have to go and look for a bit of material, but the crane has been working all the way through November. It's going to transfer to the conference centre very shortly, and we'll be erecting the very large trusses there. There are 4 critical buildings on this campus, and those are the buildings that essentially do with the main facilities like the boilers and the chillers, and then the 3 main buildings that are basically the academic buildings. The timber frame behind us is in fact the admin building, which is really offline from a student point of view, but important from an administration point of view. Mm-hmm. The review that we spent all last week doing with the contractors, and we looked at the schedule for those 4 critical buildings. They will all be what we call substantially completed by the end of July. Now, under the terms of a contract that we have here, substantial completion means that the buildings are essentially ready for the occupancy for which they were intended. And that means at that stage we can start finalising our furniture layouts and doing the final commissioning and so on.
So the 4 main buildings being the library, the lab, the agora, and the physical plant.
Right. Now we call it the library, of course, but that's going to house all the classrooms, all the centrally scheduled classrooms.
Mm-hmm. When people think of the construction season, they usually think of April to early November. And many people are surprised when they hear that there's, a couple hundred people working up here all year round. Mm-hmm. What maybe challenges does winter pose, and what misconceptions also does winter pose about construction?
Well, as you know, I joined this project back in late July, early August, and we just finished a $1 million downtown campus in Edmonton called Grant MacEwan Community College. We let the main contract for that in late November, and the contractor started pouring concrete and never stopped. And it, by and large, apart from the lack of daylight, winter construction, by and large, in northern Canada isn't a problem. The problems, quite frankly, I would rather pour concrete in the winter time than when it's plus 30 and the concrete's starting to dry out and not, in fact, cure hydraulically. But I guess, fortunately, those 4 critical buildings were all enclosed before any of the heavy frost started and so on, so we were not affected by the winter.
With natural light being a feature of so many areas on campus, the arrival of glass had been a major part of getting the buildings enclosed, and so far nearly 3,000 windows have been installed. It was a critical element predicted months earlier.
The critical issues, of course, that we have to look at is because of the construction season is getting the buildings closed in and waterproof so that as we go into the winter that they can continue to work on the inside of those buildings. So that is really a critical issue for us, and the critical kinds of things that we have to have completed by then, of course, is we have to have the windows installed, we have to have the buildings waterproofed, we have to have the roofs on and so on. So those are the critical issues now that we're concerned that Foundation get underway with that particular phase of the work. Once that's done, why then, of course, then they can start on the interior finishing of the buildings.
What's going to be the main focus on campus between now and substantial completion?
Oh, well, it's just all the nice finishing trades. The drywalling, the painting, the installation of the AV systems, the installation of the control systems, the lighting grids, all those nice things that really are done indoors anyway. Now that we've got a nice indoor temperature, we've got the places fully heat with temporary heating and so on. We're about to start switching the boilers on. They won't be used for temporary heat, but we'll have all those ready. And it's all those nice things that, in fact, you know, are rewarding in a way, because now you can see the end of the thing, you can see the completion of it, you can see the shapes of the final rooms and everything else.
It's like a football game that you're going into the 4th quarter, you're leading by 3 points. So in a sense, the game isn't over yet, but at least you're ahead. Oh
no, I don't look upon this as a game. I think I look upon this as a very serious thing, and certainly the time we spent on the schedules was, we're confident now, me and my team are confident that those dates will be met. I guess we might get an act of God, but I can't think of one. We've had very, very good cooperation from the general contractor and his subcontractors. We've had good cooperation from the tradespeople. We're not expecting any labor problems. Those are the sort of things that could affect us. All the long delivery equipment is in, all the boilers, the chillers, the pumps, the elevators, all those things are on site and being installed. And we can't foresee why there should be a problem from here on in. I don't think there's any negative business at all to it. And particularly if Her Majesty comes and opens it, that will be something. Maybe we'll give us some snow then.
Every month on this program, we're taking a current issue and getting some opinions from UNBC academics. Earlier shows, for example, have included discussions on the federal election and the North American Free Trade Agreement. Well, this is Heart Month in BC, and whether it's broken, stressed out, or simply working too darn hard, the old ticker is always an important issue.
It's an important issue because if you do public surveys of the things that people think are risk factors for heart disease, what you usually find, if you ask the general public what are the principal risk factors for heart disease, they will typically mention smoking first. They know that now. But typically the second risk factor that they name is stress. The interesting part about that is that from the scientific point of view, the issue is much more controversial than that. There are not a lot of very good studies that establish just how stress works. Not all stress is the same. That if you use the concept stress, people talk about different kinds. There's work stress, there's the stress that's associated with your family, there's social stress, and so on and so forth. There's cognitive stress that comes from the kinds of things that we have to do day to day. Well, it turns out, from our research anyway, that if you look at the physiological processes that we think are related to heart disease, the most important stressors are interpersonal stressors. Those situations where we're dealing with other people and for one reason or other we're quite uncomfortable about it.
So broken heart may be a pretty good term to use after all.
Well, a broken heart as a result of dealings with other people, or maybe just an angry heart even from time to time, yeah.
When people understand that 75,000 Canadians die every year of heart disease, that every week 175 British Columbians die of heart disease. That it affects not just the elderly, that affects children, it affects middle age, you know, and the seniors. It is a disease that can attack anyone at any time. And I think when it does impact your family and the people that we have met through the foundation here, it is an incredible upset to the whole family structure. And anybody who's been impacted, directly or indirectly, by a close friend or family, understand the impact that heart disease does have. The government alone pays out $17 billion a year in medical costs for heart treatment and in lost wages. It makes an incredible impact on society as a whole.
The Heart and Stroke Foundation has a number of activities planned during the month to make people more aware of cardiovascular disease, often called Canada's most preventable disease.
When you talk about prevention, you're pretty much talking about behavior and lifestyle choices. There are other aspects to it as well. There's clear genetic loading on heart disease, and that has an important implication as well. But a great proportion of what you're talking about really is lifestyle.
What would be some of those lifestyle changes that one could make to make their heart a healthier organ?
Well, in terms of what's known currently, there's probably a collection of about 4 or 5 things you would recommend that people do. The first one, of course, being if you smoke, don't stop. It's clearly the leading behavioral risk factor for cardiovascular disease. A prudent diet, low in fat, making sure that you get significant amounts of physical activity over the course of the week, knowing your blood pressure and doing something about it if it's high. All of those things.
Without a doubt, I think heart disease is basically our #1 problem. It outstrips cancer. I mean, cancer is something that is definitely a problem too, but I mean, there's more people that are killed, that die from heart disease, or the complications, or the disability that it causes, than any other thing. So yes, heart disease is the #1 thing that we should be concentrating on. And as was previously mentioned, it is maybe one of the more preventable ones.
I think we're going to end up ultimately having to address the idea that the very social structure that we live in North American society may be the fundamentally most important thing that we as scientists have to address if we're interested in both preventing and minimizing the impact of heart disease. I think in the future we may end up as cardiovascular scientists being interested in child-rearing techniques, because you can begin to trace the origins of some forms of cardiovascular disease right down to the very basic social level of how people relate to one another. And when you think about that, that takes you very far away from what most people think about as the focus of cardiovascular research.
That opens up a whole, I don't want to say can of worms, but it sure makes the research that much more broad.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, you begin to be confronted with the fact that Canada does not have, what the Western world doesn't have, enough people who are trained to address those issues. That's why what we're doing at UNBC, I think, is very important in terms of having a faculty of health and human sciences that's interdisciplinary and will be able to provide that kind of training that we as a nation are going to need.
Canada's Governor-General Ray Natishin will be attending UNBC's spring convocation ceremony to officially unveil the university's new coat of arms. Other events scheduled for the May 14th convocation at Prince George's new Civic Centre include the awarding of both honorary and undergraduate degrees. UNBC now has a regional coordinator for the Northwest region. Margaret Anderson has been appointed to the post after already spending 2 years at UNBC as both program chair and director of First Nations programs.
I think that the initial challenge will be to have a clear sense of what the priorities are, to be able to visit the communities and to get to know the people and to hear what their aspirations are, who the students they can identify are, what the programs are that they think they need and that they have students for, how we can generate extra students for that region if there are programs or initiatives that could do that, how we can link up to the research initiatives that are beginning at UNBC. And basically it's the kind of putting together small pieces to make something much larger. It's that sort of a job, that kind of administration, not the grand scheme planning where you can start with all the resources you want, but rather seeing the possibilities in the initiatives that people have and putting them together.
Regional advisory committees have recently been established in the Northwest, the Northeast, and the South Central regions. The purpose of the committees is to advise the university on various regional issues and support the regional coordinators. A full report on the inaugural meetings for the committees will be appearing on the next Spotlight on UNBC. Also coming up next month, a full report on a meeting held in Dawson Creek in late January between the university and all 3 northern colleges. While Spotlight on UNBC is a monthly program highlighting developments at UNBC, weekly updates are also produced with the Prince George media. The latest edition has been on television of all places, where PGTV is now broadcasting weekly updates Thursday evenings during the local news at 5:30 and 11. This is the closest many people come to meeting the Queen, but the opportunity will present itself on August 17th when Her Majesty will be in the city to officially open the Prince George UNBC campus. PGTV's daily community close-up feature also has a university connection. UNBC employees and students are featured on the program every Friday morning at 11:50.
How does it feel to be a pioneer?
Really special. Yeah. You're in a unique position to be able to be a first graduate, hopefully, of the UNBC program, coming out of a university just set up, brand new in the north, learned, talked about in other universities. It's quite an honor, actually.
Turning back to more academic matters, UNBC economics professor Paul Bowles has just co-written a book on an economy poised for incredible growth. The political economy of China's financial reforms looks at what impact the reforms already have and likely will have. And for all the latest UNBC news, call the info line 24 hours a day at 960-5678. The recently published calendar for the 1994-95 academic year details the various degree programs UNBC will be offering starting in September. And starting this month, Spotlight on UNBC is doing the same thing. Each month we're going to highlight a different faculty at the university and the programs each will offer. And we start this month with the Faculty of Natural Resources and Environmental Studies.
One of the really important factors related to land management in general at this point in time is that we no longer have the option to basically specialize in how we deal with land management. And by that I mean we can no longer look at a piece of land and say, well, we're going to extract timber from that land, and that's the only value that that land has. And part of the controversy that currently rages within the province is because we have a lot of people who've been educated to be advocates of wildlife, to be advocates of fisheries, to be advocates of timber production. In reality, we need people to have an understanding of the capabilities of the land base to meet a whole set of values related to both ecological requirements and social values.
The biology program at the University of Northern British Columbia, as well as the major in biology, we will also have majors in wildlife, fisheries, and plant biology. If you think of the communities of Northern British Columbia, they're uniquely dependent on the biology of the area, on the health of the fisheries, health of forestry, plant science. But at the same time, all of those biological communities require proper management. Their very health depends on what we, the people of Northern British Columbia, are doing with them. At University of Northern British Columbia, we hope to teach our students how land managers, how park managers, how we are looking after these resources and what values they have to society. If we look at the cottonwoods here, they are an excellent example. They provide habitat for black bears in the winter, they provide habitat for flickers, a variety of birds in the summertime. Yet we have to understand not just their immediate growth, but the conditions that lead to their establishment, survival. The changes in water flow that allow them to grow are the same changes that the fisheries communities need for spawning, survival of hatchlings, We want our students to be able to understand these links between all of the components in the landscape.
What are the social issues with respect to the environment? What are some of the economic concerns we have, for example, with forestry, with mining, with other resource issues such as hydro development? Secondly, an environmental studies program will teach students the biophysical aspects of environmental issues. What is an impact assessment? How do we gauge a physical impact assessment with respect, for example, to fisheries, with respect to other wildlife issues? So there's a socioeconomic component and there's a scientific component. When I was an undergrad, when I finished my first degree, I was thinking, well, what am I going to do now, and what was important? You know, what was important to me at the time? And the first thing that I tell people at a law firm is an education in environmental issues and environmental studies. You will have an understanding of environmental issues when you open a newspaper anywhere in the world. Secondly, I hope that we'll be able to offer you, through our developing co-op program, an opportunity at the job market. I think that's very important, and I think academic institutions have to address that more, especially in these hard times, and for our own survival. So education first, secondly, an option into the job market, and thirdly, it'll make you a better person.
Natural resource isn't just an economic item or simply an item that has a certain biological function. It fits in the society as a matrix. And so as an individual, as a member of society, as a member of a particular culture, you'll have certain understandings. And that's what we want to give people. They'll understand how the government deals with it, and they'll also understand how institutions, the non-government organizations also think about resources, and why you get such bitter conflicts, such as over the logging in old-growth forest.
Geography is generally broken down into two areas, the human component and the physical component. So there's going to be an emphasis on the physical component, which will provide a BSc for an undergraduate program, and that would include a focus on geomorphology, which is the study of landforms, their processes that develop them, and the distribution of landforms in the province and in the world, and as well hydrology, which is a study of moving water, specifically in rivers. So that will be a focus on the physical geography side, and then there will also be an economic and a cultural component, which is generally considered the human portion of geography programs. And a BA in geography will be offered in this first year. Our predominant number of physical courses focus on the hydrology, geomorphology, soils, climatology, these types of things which are about the physical landscape in the general area. So it would be a much more, for the BSc, it would be a much more concerned with local processes, and which would feed back into the kind of natural resource programs or problems of fisheries, where you're dealing with river systems and materials in river systems, and as well with general environmental science concerns, where you're looking at earth surface processes that relate to environmental impact or moving materials around.
The area is a new field, let's say. It's an exciting field. Adventure recreation and ecotourism are the fastest growing sectors of the travel tourism industry, which is itself, given its projected rate of growth, it will soon be the largest industry in the world. So there are going to be many job opportunities and entrepreneurial opportunities. And as the world generally looks to alternative uses of its natural resources, to that of resource extraction, utilization, many areas, including British Columbia and Canada generally, are looking to develop their outdoor recreational opportunities and the eco-type tourism opportunities. And given the interdisciplinary nature of the resource management degree, which outdoor recreation tourism will be framed within, I think the people we will be training will be ideally positioned with a nice depth and a nice breadth of skills to manage our natural settings for recreational uses in ways which are productive and sustainable. And that's a key word to the natural resource management program generally. We have to be capable of managing that tourism and recreational development in ways which preserve environmental settings, but also cultures which exist within those settings. And as an example of my own research, I've looked at the Sherpa culture in Nepal. Many people are familiar with the growth of the trekking industry and mountaineering industry in the Himalaya, in the Nepal mountain. And many people are also aware of the quite major environmental impacts that have been occurring out there. Fewer are aware of the fact that the Sherpa culture has been impacted quite drastically over the past 25 years. Their culture has been degraded somewhat by the influence of a quite dominant Western culture from the dominant Western visitors who go there, and Japanese and Australia, New Zealand, and British. But certainly, and the key term when we think about developing recreational settings in wilderness and semi-wilderness areas, you know, is sustainable, and we need to train people to be aware of not just the benefits which are associated with that development, but to be aware of the negative impacts that can occur, and to plan and manage to prevent that.
Forestry today is a very complex area, very complex discipline. It's no longer just enough to know the technical aspects of managing forests. It's not enough just to know the scientific properties of forests. Today, forests are a resource that means so many different things to so many people. People view forests differently, they value forests differently, and people are placing growing importance on forests all the time for a whole variety of reasons. Therefore, it's important for anybody that wants to pursue a career in forestry to have a really solid grounding in the many aspects, the cultural aspects, the scientific, the economic. And so that's what our program is all about. It's the traditional strong emphasis on the scientific and technical aspects, as well as a very broad-based education that will allow people to be very responsive to society's needs for forests in the future.
This university will have the capacity to continue to meet the challenges that society imposes. And we have lots of challenges out there within the environment. We have lots of challenges that we're going to have to face, not just the Canadians, but as members as a larger global society, that relate to resource utilization, that relate to not just understanding, but maintaining those base ecological processes that support life on this planet, and basically understanding the interactions between the physical and the biological components of the environment out there. And I would like to think that this faculty will make significant contributions in those areas, both in the areas of teaching and of research.
Thank you for watching this edition of Spotlight on UNBC. Tune in next month to find out more of what's happening at the University of Northern British Columbia.